welcome to another episode of ContXt. My name is Chris BT, and I'm glad because today I have a comeback. I have Coco right here with me. Coco is also known as Vanessa Ndinda or the Influencer Whisperer. Hi, Vanessa, how are you?
Hi, Chris. I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Well, I'm glad to have you back. Looking at the reactions, the reaction that we've had with the previous videos, we had to bring you back, right?
Great, thank you.
All right, so let's just dive in. So Coco and I were having a conversation earlier on because we just really asked ourselves just a candid conversation and wanted to find out what it really takes for either a brand or an individual to create some really solid influence online. What does it really take? Are there certain things that you need to do? And it turns out that there are a couple of things that you can actually do. So I'd like to hear from Vanessa. Vanessa, what do you think about that? Do you think there are some things that systematically brands or influencers or content creators can do to achieve that?
Yes, I look at influencer marketing similarly to how we live our lives and how we go about basic relationships in our lives. I feel like a lot of people, it's called social media for a reason, because you need a community, you need people, you need to be social. So, how we approach social media as influencers, as content creators, and even as clients really needs to be pegged on how we genuinely live our day-to-day life and how we associate with people around us. And so because of that, there's certain, do I call them attributes or, principles that you could borrow from your own personal relationships and, fix it into your social media strategy and in turn have a very successful, social media platform.
Thank you for that. But what are these? I'm sure people are curious. So what are those? You said they're principles. What are those principles?
I want to have a conversation with you, like the same conversation we were having with you on call. And I'll throw back a question and I'll ask you, Chris, what are some of the important factors or important principles that matter to you in friendships? What's the one thing that's so important to you in a friendship or even in a relationship or even between you and your sibling or your parent? What are some of those things?
Well, as usual, you throw it back at me, throwing it back at me, as usual. Okay, anyway. So for me, to be honest, I think two things really stand out. One is integrity, and the second thing is consistency. There are other things like trust, honesty and all that, and it all goes into trust as well. Yeah, so that's what I would say. Top of mind, that's what I would say. What about you?
I think one of the biggest things for me, I would say, is communication and trust. Like every woman.
It just came back. It just came back. Cool.
Any woman in this world, communication is very important. And of course, that's what I even have studied. I genuinely do love the concept of communication. It's very important.
All right. So what are we saying? So we're saying trust. Yeah.
Trust.
We're saying what else?
Consistency. Communication. But communication, we can put it in a different way. Let's say under communication, let's put engagement.
Yeah. Okay. Looking at the context.
Right?
Yeah. Looking at our current context, yes. Engagement.
Consistency. The other thing would be authenticity. Correct.
All right, Vanessa. So let's just summarize this. So we're saying trust, authenticity, consistency, engagement, right?
And engagement, yes, which is basically communication. Right.
Basically. So I would like to go and talk about trust. And the context really here is influencer marketing and content creation, right? And before that, I'd like to tell you a little story. I have a lot of people that believe that influencer marketing doesn't work. They ask me, oh, look, you know what? Can you really trust these influencers? Honestly, what makes you sure that if you spend money with an influencer, a great influencer at that, you will probably get value? All right, Vanessa. So now that we've summarized this, let me tell you a story because I think it will create a good context for this, right? So, so I worked with a client before, and I suggested influencer marketing because of the type of client, brand that we have, and I thought it was going to work. So the client was very skeptical. One of these people that don't believe that influencer marketing works. So I told them that we started on a small scale, and then we could actually then scale up later. So, and what I did with the influencer basically is I made sure that all the leads that were coming from the influencer were actually really taken into consideration. So when we were running the campaign, we had the people working for the brand, that were specifically asking some questions, right? So where did you get this lead? Where did you hear about us, and so on? And further, we even asked them to specifically ask, why is it that because they saw that influencer talking about the brand, they decided to buy? And do you know what they said? One thing, really important, because we trust him. Because whatever he says is probably true. So here we go. So now, Vanessa, I'd like to hear from you about, why you think trust is one of the most important things, and how some people and brands could actually achieve trust in this space.
All right. So that's a very common story amongst, clients who've never worked with influencers before. They will always start with doubts, and they're just like, okay, will this work? They probably don't even put in too much thought into it because to them, it just doesn't make sense. This is something new. But to be honest, Chris, if you look at where influencing as a concept began, probably it could be you basically seeing your neighbor using a certain washing soap.
Yeah.
Right? And our mothers, in fact, we're shooting this the weekend of Mother's Day. And our mothers, they always love to chit chat. Where is the best supermarket to buy tomatoes and onions? And, what is the best soap? What is the best, everything. So they always consult each other. And so influencing actually started there. Peer influencing was the birth of influencer marketing. 83% of consumers actually trust peer influencing than they do brands. Now more than ever, we've sadly lost a lot of our trust in brands by themselves. Sadly. For some reason that has happened because they're always trying to push a sale and they'll never talk about the cons of their product. You know what I mean? So it really goes down to, what has my friend told me about this and that? Let me give an example of also, let's say if I want to purchase a specific item, be it a phone, let's say a phone. I will call a friend who recently purchased a phone, or I know is good in tech, and I will ask him or her, because it's not only the guys who are good in tech, by the way.
In what country? In what country are we talking? We need to be very, very careful when it comes to. I'm really sorry to cut you, but if we're talking about Kenya, okay. I'm not very sure. When it comes to tech, I have the impression that men are more trusted. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your friend, who your friend is. So I'll go to this particular person and I'll ask them, by the way, I'm looking to buy a phone. This is the brand I want to buy. This is my budget. And these are the two places that I have in mind I could purchase from. Do you have any recommendation, or do you have any experience with these two buyers, so that I can be sure that I'm putting my money in the right place? And so from my friend's recommendation, because I trust him more than I trust those two places, I will purchase based on what he has told me. Fine. The brands have done a good job to put themselves out there where I was able to find them and be like, okay, I might consider this shop. Yeah. But what will influence my final decision will be a recommendation from a trusted peer or a
Okay.
trusted source, which in this case is an influencer. I also want to say that I believe with all of my heart that if you lose the trust between you as an influencer stroke content creator with your audience, you have lost your influence.
Good point. So what are the type of things that could lead to that? So what could people do to make sure, that they don't lose that trust? We all know, Vanessa, we all know a lot of influencers that have, misled, their audiences, right? And they had to pay somehow the price, right? So what are the things that people can do to avoid that?
To avoid losing the trust of your audience, I want to take you back to a conversation I heard recently. Actually, not recently, sometime last year when COVID started. There was a great show on YouTube called Cleaning the Airwaves, CTA. And I think among the first interviews that was done was by Nonini. And he was basically telling people how, back in the day when his music was coming out, he was one of the most, popular artists. Everyone was talking about him. Everyone was playing his music, but he was not getting any corporate brand deals. And just because he had so much controversy around him, and it took him a while to realize that controversial conversations around you will not make you money. And we see a lot of that now where influencers use the direction to use controversy or build a whole story or create a whole scenario in an attempt to get talkability and to get more followers. But what you're really doing, fine, people will look at you, people will pay attention to you, but they will not trust you. You are really damaging the trust between yourself and your audience. And so I believe, and even looking at our personal relationships, let me ask you, Chris, what are some of the things that you do with your friends to make sure that they constantly trust you as a person? Because it's really that basic.
No, it is true. I try to be consistent, right? I try to be consistent.
Okay.
And what would I say? Well, for me, it's if I demand integrity, I need to be able to actually show that I have integrity too, right? So in everything that I do, I try my best.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the answer that you wanted, but anyway.
Yeah. I believe you can be consistent but still not trustworthy.
But I think trust is something that obviously that is built over time, obviously, right? So with friends, family, Definitely. And so on, obviously, so you intentionally do certain things, to make sure that people understand really what it is that you stand for. And then at the same time as well, you're not always in control. People observe as well, and especially to go back to what it is that we were talking about, audiences have become very sophisticated, very, So all these influencers that think, that they're very smart by always using controversy to create talkability, I don't think it's going to work forever, right? I think people get tired of certain things, and when they get fed up, it's over, right?
Yeah. So I strongly believe that trust is built. You cannot wake up and trust somebody overnight. Trust is built from past experiences. So if I follow you as an influencer for a while, I will watch you, I will pay attention to you before I take your recommendation on something. I will even take that extra mile to see, is there anyone else who has purchased something based on this person's recommendation? And I will see, okay, so what are some of the comments? Go through the comment section, listen to what other people are saying and doing as a result of this particular influencer's communication on social. Social listening is very important, not only on social media to clients, but also in our individual lives. Listen to what the people around you are saying about this particular person. And then from there, you need to make your own judgment. If this person has been consistent with the type of communication that they have been putting out, and even see how they lead their lives, that they don't just jump on any brand that comes their way because, they're offering money. They're jumping on a brand because this is a brand that they're truly interested to work with, if it's a new brand. But also if it's an existing brand, this is a brand that they have been using over the period of some time. And so some of these things really, really matter when it comes to me making a decision whether I trust an influencer or not. I believe that an influencer can make or break their trust between them and their audience. I mean, there are scenarios where the public have chosen to come up with stories about influencers and content creators, and that has really damaged some trust based on a third party's opinion. You know what I mean? But I strongly believe if you have been consistent throughout and communicating openly with your audience, then that trust should be built and sustained regardless. Yeah.
Really good. Vanessa, I mean, I listened to what you said, and there are so many important points. I mean, one of the things, yes, indeed. One of the things is, you were talking about the choice of brands to work with, right? So, I mean, Vanessa, I don't think a lot of influencers. I mean, we have a lot of influencers working out there, but there are very few influencers that are really, really careful, and that have that integrity, that have so much integrity that they would refuse, really to work with certain brands simply because of what it is that they've decided that they stand for. No matter how much money, they're going to make. To illustrate that, there's one of the influencers that I work with, and she just will not work with any alcoholic brand simply because that's what she's decided. Because she doesn't drink. And she doesn't believe that she would represent these brands, right? So, and therefore, no matter how much money you give her, she says that she will not pose, selling an alcoholic brand, for example. So but it's not very easy because sometimes, Vanessa, and you know how it is in those streets, when you're starting out, you don't have a lot of money, you need to survive, right? So, and sometimes people are actually, people do things, simply because they have to survive. So, but when you're an established influencer, to be honest, it's very important, as Vanessa says, to be very clear on what it is that you stand for, on the types of brands that you're going to work with, right?
Yeah.
So Vanessa, so we're talking about trust here.
Yeah.
But I mean, we should probably move to the other topics. Basically, the other principles. Or you have something else that you would like to add?
Yes, I have something to do. This is basically an advice to every influencer out there. There's so many situations, and this can really diminish the trust between you and your audience, is when probably you've worked in a paid partnership with a brand, whatever it is, and then, after your partnership with that brand, you start talking very negatively about that brand, or you start talking about more highly about another brand than you would have than you did that one. Yeah. So this really diminishes the trust between you and your audience. But here's the thing, we are not saying don't do that, because you have the sole responsibility to guide your followers towards the right direction, right? But I feel like for that to have happened to you, you did not do your due diligence on that brand before you started working on that brand. That's plain and simple. You did not do your due diligence. As an influencer, it is your responsibility to do your due diligence on any brand that you work with, because the minute you attach any brand to your name and your brand, it becomes your responsibility, right? And if somebody has a negative experience with a brand, and we see that, and we see this a lot, brands pay you so that you can talk about the positives about the product. But whenever there's a problem, or whenever there's an issue, you cannot talk about it because I'm paying you as a client, right?
Yeah, but Vanessa, I mean, I remember there was an episode like that, I think last year, but I won't go into details. But, I think one of the things as well that maybe we didn't necessarily mention is you have to be human, and you're not perfect. You can do your due diligence and realize later on that, okay, you know what, there's a little bit of a problem with this brand. You need to have the courage, I believe, I don't know what you think, Vanessa, the courage to address it, not to trash the brand, but to really address it and tell your followers why you don't share that very same sentiment that you had before. What do you think of that?
Yes, I believe the key is in delivery, how you talk about it. You don't do it. You don't go about it the right way when you start talking about another brand You know what I mean?
Yes.
I feel like if you have acknowledged that you worked with a brand and this is what is happening, and you no longer stand for what this brand is doing, state it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you going and now working with another brand, for me as a consumer and as your follower, I'm just like, okay, so this babe, is she really serious? You know, is she being really honest with me? So there are ways. I think the key is in delivery. And like you said, I completely agree with, we are human. Sometimes you buy something, sometimes you work with people and you realize, oh my goodness, they're horrible, you know?
Yeah. As simple as that.
So I strongly believe that, you know, harness that trust with your audience the way you would with people in your life. Yeah. And I'm not saying talk to all your followers, all 5 million of them, talk to them. No. I'm just saying how you go about your life on social, in real life with people that you care about. Do the same thing, you know, with them. The way you would have handled a situation where now you feel like, oh gosh, you made a mistake, you know, come back and actually, you know, talk to them. And that's really going to, you know, prove a lot to them as well. I feel like there's something else I needed to say, but it's completely slipping my mind.
But from what it is that, you know, if I may, from what it is that I hear, you know, funny enough, you've actually even started touching on authenticity as well, you know, somehow, right? For some reason, you know, it was one of the points that we had, but I think you've started touching a little bit on authenticity. So, but which is basically our next point, and I think we need to really address that. And Vanessa, if you remember what it is that you wanted to say, I mean, we can always come back to it, right?